It was an ordinary morning in the quiet town of Grantham, Lincolnshire, in the early spring of 1972. The streets were calm, the shops opening their doors slowly, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted from the local bakery. In the midst of the serene scene, Sheila Fox, a 28-year-old woman with a gentle presence and a warm, inviting smile, prepared for what should have been a routine day. Sheila was the kind of person who left a quiet mark on the lives she touched. Her friends remember her as thoughtful, kind, and endlessly patient. She worked at a local charity organization, helping families in need, and had a way of making even the most difficult moments feel manageable. Her laughter was soft, yet it carried a lightness that seemed to brighten any room she entered. That morning, Sheila kissed her cat goodbye, waved at the neighbors she often exchanged pleasantries with, and stepped outside her modest terrace home. No one knew, at that moment, that this seemingly ordinary day would become the beginning of a mystery that will remain unsolved for more than half a century. By 10 a.m., Sheila was expected at the charity's office, but she never arrived. At first, colleagues assumed she had simply been delayed. Perhaps the bus had been late, or she had stopped to chat with someone on her way. But as the hours ticked by, and there was still no sign of her, unease began to creep in. Her friends and family tried to reach her by phone, but the line remained silent. They knocked on her door, only to find it locked, quiet, and still. Sheila had simply vanished. In cases like this, the initial hours are crucial. Authorities were notified, and a missing person report was filed. The Grantham police launched an immediate search, but despite thorough checks of her home, the surrounding neighborhood, and nearby parks, no trace of Sheila could be found. Her handbag, keys, and personal belongings remained untouched at her home, an unsettling detail that suggested she had left in a hurry or, more alarmingly, had been taken against her will. The first days were filled with frantic searches, door-to-door inquiries, and mounting worry. Flyers were posted in local shops, and neighbors were questioned. Her family made tearful appeals to the public, speaking to local radio stations and newspapers, hoping that someone, somewhere, had seen Sheila or knew where she was. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, and still, Sheila Fox was missing. The police initially explored all the common explanations for her disappearance. Did Sheila leave voluntarily? Was she a victim of foul play? Could an accident have occurred? But every lead seemed to reach a dead end. She had no known enemies. She wasn't involved in any risky activities, and there was no indication she had intended to leave her life behind. Neighbors and friends spoke about her routines, her habits, and her predictable daily life. Sheila was someone who liked stability, someone who enjoyed simple pleasures. A quiet evening reading a book, a walk in the park, or visiting the small cafes tucked away in the town's narrow streets. Her disappearance, therefore, felt inexplicable. As time passed, the investigation became one of the largest in the county. Officers revisited the case multiple times, speaking to friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual that day. Old leads were re-examined with fresh eyes, but the trail remained cold. Grantham was a small town, but somehow, Sheila had disappeared without a trace. Her case made headlines across the region. Newspapers published photos of her smiling face, appealing to the public for any information. But, like so many missing person cases, the news cycle eventually moved on. Life continued for the town, but for Sheila's family, every day was a painful reminder of her absence. Her mother, Margaret Fox, spoke publicly about the heartbreak of living without her daughter. She recounted the endless nights pacing the house, hoping for a knock at the door, praying for a sign, and hoping desperately that Sheila would return. Sheila's father, John, never stopped searching either, refusing to accept that his daughter could simply vanish into thin air. Friends organized vigils and awareness campaigns, keeping her memory alive, even as hope began to fade. In the early 1970s, the tools available to law enforcement for investigating disappearances were limited. There was no CCTV to review, no cell phone signals to track, and no internet to aid in spreading alerts quickly. Police relied heavily on witness accounts, physical searches, and local reporting. And while the community of Grantham was cooperative, there simply were no solid leads. Theories abounded, ranging from Sheila having left voluntarily, to abduction, to even the darkest suspicions of foul play. But none could be proven. During the following months, some locals recalled seeing a woman resembling Sheila near the train station in Grantham, carrying a suitcase and appearing distressed. Others thought they saw her in nearby towns, but the sightings were fleeting, unverified, and ultimately inconclusive. The case slowly slipped from active headlines, but never from the hearts of those who loved her. The disappearance became a defining part of the town's history. Generations grew up knowing the story of Sheila Fox, the woman who vanished without a trace. Families in Grantham would speak about her in hushed tones, and local journalists occasionally revisited the story, hoping to uncover something new. Yet, decade after decade, the mystery endured. Despite the lack of evidence, the police never officially closed the case. Every few years, a new detective would take a fresh look, hoping modern investigative techniques might reveal something missed in the 1970s. Advances in forensic science, DNA analysis, and national databases promised the potential for breakthroughs that had been unimaginable at the time of her disappearance. But for decades, the case remained a haunting cold file, emblematic of the pain caused by unresolved loss. Her disappearance had ripples beyond Grantham. News of missing women often sparked national discussions about safety, the responsibilities of law enforcement, and the impact on families. Sheila's case became a reference point in studies on long-term missing person investigations, illustrating both the limits of early investigative methods and the enduring emotional toll on loved ones. Throughout the years, her family never gave up hope. Letters were sent to newspapers and government offices. Private investigators were hired. Friends and acquaintances maintained phone trees, community networks, and informal alerts. All the while, Sheila's face, the smiling, gentle woman with an unwavering kindness, remained vivid in their minds. The community, too, never forgot. Each anniversary of her disappearance saw local gatherings, small memorials, and quiet moments of reflection. Grantham's residents, even those who never knew her personally, felt a shared sense of sorrow and unresolved tension. She had become a symbol of the countless missing individuals whose cases were left unanswered. Yet, somewhere beyond the town, beyond the local streets she once walked, Sheila Fox was out there. The question that lingered in every conversation, every police report, and every memory was simple but unbearable. Where was she? As the decades passed, new technologies slowly began to change the landscape of missing person investigations. The 1990s brought improved databases and early DNA profiling. In the 2000s, digital record-keeping and enhanced communication networks provided avenues for reopening old cases. But Sheila's trail had gone cold long before these advancements, leaving investigators and family members in a limbo of uncertainty. Through it all, the story of Sheila Fox remained one of hope intertwined with grief, of enduring mystery amid the ordinary rhythms of life. Every small lead, every rumor, every potential sighting reignited a flicker of possibility, only to be dashed by the stubborn weight of reality. And yet, even in the face of 50 years without answers, there was a persistent, almost stubborn belief among those who loved her that one day Sheila would be found, that the story would have a resolution, that the chapters of her life would finally be reunited with the people who had never stopped caring. In 2025, that day would come. But before that astonishing twist, before the world learned that Sheila Fox had survived, that she was living quietly in another part of the country, it was essential to understand the depth of the mystery, the fabric of her life before her disappearance, and the enduring quest for answers that spanned more than 5 decades. This is the story of Sheila Fox, not just of her disappearance, but the decades of absence that shaped lives, communities, and hearts. It is a story of hope stretched across time, of love refusing to fade, and of the astonishing revelation that even the longest cold cases can sometimes, miraculously, reach a conclusion. So, join us as we begin a journey into one of the most remarkable missing person cases in British history. In this first chapter, we explore who Sheila Fox was, the morning she disappeared, and the initial investigation that set the stage for a mystery that would endure for over 50 years. Stay with us as each part unfolds, revealing the twists, turns, and ultimate resolution that captivate an entire nation. Before we continue, if you find yourself intrigued by stories like Sheila's, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates from our deep dives into real-life mysteries and cold cases. Because what happened to Sheila Fox is not just a story about a disappearance. It's a story about resilience, about enduring hope, and about the power of never giving up on someone, no matter how many years have passed. As the days passed after Sheila Fox's disappearance, the quiet town of Grantham was gripped by a sense of unease. The ordinary rhythm of daily life now carried a subtle tension, the kind that hangs in the air when a shadow falls over a familiar place. Police officers scoured the town, following every lead, revisiting every corner, and knocking on every door in search of someone, anyone, who might have seen Sheila that morning. The initial investigation was methodical, though constrained by the limitations of the time. Officers took statements from friends, family, and neighbors, constructing a timeline of Sheila's last known movements. Her morning routine, usually predictable and comforting in its steadiness, was scrutinized with painstaking care. The moment she left her home, every potential route she could have taken was mapped. Every street, shop, and alleyway was examined for footprints, eyewitness accounts, or anything that might hint at her path. The detectives quickly learned that missing persons cases are often a test of patience and persistence. Leads appeared promising at first, but too often evaporated into dead ends. The first clue, a report of a woman matching Sheila's description walking toward the Grantham train station, sparked hope. Witnesses claimed to have seen her carrying a modest handbag, appearing calm but determined. Some even said she seemed to be waiting for someone. But when police checked train schedules and canvassed nearby towns, there was no record of her leaving Grantham. The sighting remained unverified, a fragment of possibility in a sea of uncertainty. Investigators explored every angle. Could Sheila have left voluntarily? Some colleagues speculated that she might have wanted a fresh start, though those who knew her dismissed the idea. Sheila was deeply rooted in her community, committed to her work and her friends. She had no history of depression, no known desire to abandon her life. The thought that she had simply walked away did not sit easily with those who loved her. Suspicion of foul play naturally surfaced. Police examined the possibility of abduction, questioning local residents, strangers, and anyone who might have had contact with Sheila around the time she vanished. The town, though small, was a tapestry of interconnected lives, and detectives meticulously interviewed everyone they could think of. The process was exhaustive, yet nothing concrete emerged. No reports of disturbances, no suspicious vehicles, no strangers acting oddly. Everything seemed normal, yet Sheila had disappeared. During these early weeks, family members played a crucial role in keeping the case alive. Her parents, Margaret and John Fox, tirelessly contacted newspapers and television stations, appealing to the public for help. Posters bearing Sheila's photo appeared in shops, train stations, and on lampposts, while radio announcements encouraged anyone with information to come forward. The emotional weight of these efforts was immense. Each day without news was a day heavy with fear, uncertainty, and the haunting question, was Sheila still alive? As months passed, the investigation faced the cruel reality of cold leads. Witness reports were inconsistent, and physical evidence was nearly non-existent. Police relied heavily on community cooperation. But even in a small town like Grantham, people's recollections were fallible. Memories faded. Stories conflicted. And so the case, once urgent and immediate, began its slow descent into the shadowed world of unresolved mysteries. During this period, theories about Sheila's disappearance began to take shape, some grounded in logic, others in fear or rumor. One line of inquiry considered a possible accident. Could Sheila have fallen or been injured in a location where she wouldn't be found? Officers searched local fields, rivers, and abandoned buildings. Teams combed through wooded areas, sometimes spending days in harsh weather. Yet no sign of her emerged. The idea that she had suffered an accident without a trace was chilling, but ultimately unsubstantiated. Another theory revolved around the possibility of abduction. The 1970s were a time when discussions about personal safety were rising, and families across Britain were becoming more aware of risks to women traveling alone. Police examined reports of criminal activity in surrounding areas, looking for patterns or suspects who might have been linked to other disappearances. Still, nothing concrete materialized. There were no arrests, no confessions, no leads that could withstand scrutiny. Friends and colleagues were questioned repeatedly. Their memories, honest but imperfect, sometimes offered fragments of insight, Some recalled seeing unfamiliar men loitering near the areas Sheila frequented. Others mentioned hearing rumors of a stranger taking interest in her. None of these accounts could be verified, and each time a potential lead turned out to be inconclusive, hope dimmed slightly. Yet the persistence of her family and community ensured the story never completely faded. Years began to pass, and Sheila's disappearance became one of those enduring mysteries that communities remember as part of their collective consciousness. New detectives inherited the case, sometimes revisiting old statements with fresh eyes. Each time, they hoped that modern investigative techniques might yield results. By the late 1980s, forensic science had progressed enough to examine the evidence with a new lens, yet even the most advanced testing could not provide answers. The investigation was exhaustive, meticulous, but ultimately inconclusive. Meanwhile, Sheila's family continued their personal search. Private investigators were hired, sometimes uncovering minor leads that added pieces to the puzzle but never completed it. Margaret Fox, who had never stopped advocating for her daughter, remained tireless in her pursuit. Friends organized awareness campaigns, community meetings, and fundraisers, hoping to draw attention to the case and spark anyone, with crucial information to come forward. Public interest in the case waxed and waned. Newspapers occasionally revisited the story, publishing anniversary features that reminded the nation of the unresolved mystery. Every article, every broadcast, brought both hope and heartache. For the people of Grantham, Sheila was not just a missing woman. She was a symbol of resilience, of the persistent question of whether the disappeared could ever be found. By the 1990s, the investigation faced a common challenge seen in long-term missing person cases. Time itself, memories faded, witnesses moved away or passed on, records were lost or misplaced. The police file grew dusty, a stark reminder of the limits of human persistence in the face of uncertainty. Yet for the Fox family, hope never fully disappeared. They knew that even a decades-old mystery could sometimes yield unexpected answers. It was during this period that discussions about national databases for missing persons began to gain traction. These systems would eventually allow law enforcement to track missing individuals across regions, link cases that seemed unrelated, and even apply early forms of DNA profiling. In hindsight, these developments would be crucial, but for Sheila, they were still years away. Despite the challenges, one thing remained constant. The story of Sheila Fox continued to resonate. Community members, even those who had never met her personally, carried her story in their hearts. Teachers in local schools spoke about her as an example of the unknowns in life, of how a single event can ripple across generations. Law enforcement used her case to train officers on missing person protocols, emphasizing the importance of persistence and attention to detail. The investigation also highlighted the emotional toll of unresolved cases. Sheila's family described the constant ache of uncertainty, the balance between living life and keeping hope alive, the weight of anniversaries that marked time without closure. Psychologists and social workers later cited cases like hers as examples of prolonged grief, illustrating the profound impact of long-term disappearances on families and communities alike. As the 21st century dawned, the case remained officially open but inactive, a cold file that waited silently for an opportunity. Advances in technology, particularly in DNA analysis and digital record-keeping, offered new possibilities. Investigators began to revisit old files, re-interview witnesses, and cross-check details with national databases. Slowly, the groundwork was being laid for the breakthrough that, decades later, would finally bring Sheila Fox back into the world she had left behind. But for now, the story remained one of suspense, heartbreak, and unwavering hope. The investigation had revealed much about human perseverance and the challenges of tracking someone lost to time, yet had not yet answered the central question: where was Sheila Fox? And as we move into the next part of this story, we'll explore the leads that emerged over the years, the theories that captivated the public imagination, and the small but persistent signs that something extraordinary was still waiting to be uncovered. If you've been following the story closely, remember to like and share this video to support our investigation into real-life mysteries. Your engagement helps bring awareness to cold cases like Sheila's, keeping hope alive for families who have waited decades for answers. Because Sheila's story teaches us something important. Even in the darkest moment of uncertainty, the search never truly ends, and sometimes the truth takes its time to come to light. The 1980s and 1990s arrived, and Grantham, like the rest of Britain, was changing. Streets grew busier, technology advanced, and life moved forward. But for the Fox family, time seemed to have frozen on that spring morning in 1972 when Sheila vanished. Each day was a reminder of the empty space her absence had left, a space that no amount of time, no amount of hope seemed able to fill. In these decades, the investigation into Sheila's disappearance transformed. What began as an active search soon became a long-term, methodical process of following leads, reassessing old evidence, and keeping the case alive in the public consciousness. Police revisited interviews, reanalyzed witness statements, and occasionally discovered minor details that hinted at possibilities previously overlooked. Each new clue brought with a spark of hope, and often heartbreak when it led nowhere. One of the greatest challenges in cold cases is how easily time erodes certainty. Memories fade, witnesses relocate, and records get lost. In Sheila's case, many potential leads dissolved under the weight of decades. People who had been children at the time of her disappearance grew into adults, their recollections of that fateful morning becoming hazy. Shops closed, homes were sold, and entire neighborhoods were altered, making retracing her steps increasingly difficult. Yet even as the years passed, the dedication of law enforcement and the relentless hope of her family ensured that Sheila's story was never forgotten. Margaret and John Fox, despite the heavy toll on their own lives, became tireless advocates for missing persons. They attended community meetings, lobbied for improved investigative procedures, and spoke publicly about the emotional devastation that comes from unresolved disappearances. Their voices were persistent, unwavering reminders that Sheila was more than a case number. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a vital presence in the lives of those who loved her. The late 1990s and early 2000s brought new tools that slowly changed the landscape for missing person investigations. DNA profiling, while still in its early stages in the 1980s, had developed into a reliable and powerful method by the turn of the millennium. National databases were emerging, designed to cross-reference missing persons with unidentified remains and to link cases across regions. For Sheila Fox, these technological advancements offer faint but crucial hope that even decades after her disappearance, answers might still be possible. During these years, some unusual but ultimately inconclusive developments arose. Private investigators hired by the family occasionally discovered minor leads. A report of a woman resembling Sheila living under a different name in a distant town, a fleeting sighting on a train platform, a distant phone call whose caller never left identifying details. None of these could be verified, but each fueled the quiet belief that Sheila was alive somewhere, even if no one could reach her. The community of Grantham remained emotionally tied to the case. Teachers would tell students about the missing woman whose story had become part of the town's shared history. Local journalists revisited the case periodically, especially on anniversaries, reminding the public that even after decades, unresolved disappearances continue to cast long shadows. Each article carried a subtle plea for anyone with knowledge, however small, to come forward. For the Fox family, anniversaries of Sheila's disappearance were bittersweet. Each year brought a mix of reflection, grief, and cautious hope. They celebrated birthdays in her absence, always aware of the life that should have been lived but wasn't. Friends organized small gatherings and memorials, maintaining a community connection to the woman who had disappeared. Through these acts, Sheila's story endured, not as a tale of defeat, but as a testament to resilience and the power of hope. Meanwhile, advancements in forensic science continue to offer new possibilities. By the 2010s, DNA testing had become both highly accurate and more accessible. Cold case units across the UK began revisiting decades-old investigations, applying modern science to old evidence. Investigators recognized that even a small trace of genetic material could, with today's technology, lead to identification or a breakthrough. For families like the Foxes, these developments reignited the belief that Sheila might one day be found. Yet even with new tools, the question remained, where was she? Was she living quietly, unaware that decades had passed, or had she chosen a life of deliberate anonymity? Perhaps she'd been compelled to disappear, or circumstances had forced her into a hidden existence. Every possibility was considered, every scenario weighed, and every effort made to follow up on even the smallest hint. The public, too, never entirely let the case fade. Online forums and social media, emerging in the 2000s and 2010s, became spaces where amateur sleuths and concerned citizens discussed missing person cases. Sheila Fox's story, though over 40 years old, occasionally surfaced in these discussions. People shared theories, speculated about her whereabouts, and kept her memory alive in digital spaces that did not exist when she first disappeared. Amid these decades of searching, one subtle pattern began to emerge. Investigators noticed that many long-term missing person cases were solved not through sudden discoveries, but through the gradual accumulation of evidence, the persistence of small clues, and the application of modern technology to old records. In other words, the breakthrough often comes when time and technology align in unexpected ways. For Sheila's family, this knowledge became both a comfort and a source of anxiety. It suggested that answers might still be possible, but also reminded them that the years of waiting could not be shortened. Every day, they lived with the delicate tension of hope tempered by experience, of believing in the possibility of reunion, while enduring the uncertainty of prolonged absence. As the 2020s approached, the UK's National Missing Persons databases had become sophisticated, incorporating genetic markers, cross-referencing regional cases, and allowing law enforcement to connect seemingly unrelated disappearances. Cold case units were actively revisiting unsolved investigations from decades past. The tools that had been unimaginable in 1972 were now routine. DNA phenotyping, facial reconstruction, and advanced data analytics provided new ways to track individuals who had been lost to time. Unbeknownst to everyone, these advancements would soon converge to bring a resolution no one had dared to imagine. Hidden records, overlooked connections, and the tireless persistence of investigators, combined with cutting-edge technology, were quietly preparing the way for one of the most remarkable discoveries in British missing person history. Yet for now, as Part 3 of this story unfolds, the narrative remains one of patience, enduring faith, and the quiet accumulation of knowledge. The investigation had not failed. It had merely waited. Each minor lead, every fleeting sighting, and every technological innovation was a thread in a web that, when finally woven together, would reveal the truth. For viewers following this story, it's important to recognize the immense dedication behind cold case investigations. Law enforcement officers, private investigators, journalists, and family members worked tirelessly for decades, often with little public recognition, driven by a single goal: to restore missing persons to their rightful place in the lives of those who love them. If you've been moved by Sheila's story so far, consider sharing this video with friends and family. Stories like hers remind us of the human cost of unresolved disappearances, the emotional toll on families, and the incredible persistence required to bring closure. By spreading awareness, you help honor those who have been lost and support the ongoing work to solve cold cases across the nation. As we move into the next chapter, the focus will shift to the turning points that led investigators closer to the truth. Now, we will explore the subtle breakthroughs, the renewed investigations, and the critical moments when decades of searching began to converge toward an astonishing revelation. Stay with us, because the story of Sheila Fox is far from over, and the moment of discovery is approaching, proving that even after 50 years, hope can endure and justice, in its own time, can still prevail. By 2025, over 50 years had passed since Sheila Fox vanished from Grantham. Half a century of unanswered questions, silent grief, and tireless searching had shaped generations. Her family, now older, still held on to a quiet hope that one day the truth would emerge. What no one could have predicted was that the breakthrough would arrive not through a single dramatic event, but through the convergence of technology, persistence, and a series of small, overlooked clues. The renewed investigation began when Scotland Yard's cold case unit decided to re-examine some of the oldest unresolved cases, applying the full weight of modern forensic and data analysis. Sheila's disappearance, remarkable for both its mystery and the long passage of time, was high on the list. Investigators revisited archive files, reviewed old witness statements, and cross-checked details against the growing national databases of missing persons and unidentified individuals. What made this period different from the decades prior was the technology at investigators' disposal. DNA phenotyping could now predict physical features with remarkable accuracy. Facial recognition software allowed for cross-referencing old photographs with contemporary records. Digital analytics made it possible to detect patterns that had been invisible to human investigators in the 1970s and 1980s. And, crucially, the national database had grown to include not only criminal records and unidentified remains, but also hospital registrations, social service records, and various forms of official documentation that could help track individuals who had quietly moved across the country. It was during this meticulous review of decades-old paperwork that the first spark of hope appeared. Investigators noticed a record of a woman matching Sheila's general description, who had registered under a slightly different name in a distant town in northern England. At first, the details seemed almost coincidental. Age estimates matched, the physical description was consistent, and there were hints that she had lived quietly and kept to herself. This discovery reignited the investigation with a renewed sense of urgency. Detectives recognized the possibility that Sheila might have been living under an assumed identity, either voluntarily or as a result of circumstances beyond her control. They began to dig deeper, cross-referencing this record with local residents, community reports, and public documents. Every piece of information, no matter how small, was scrutinized with a precision that modern investigative tools allowed. The breakthrough came when DNA evidence, carefully preserved from old case files, was compared in national databases. A match emerged. Though fragmented and partially degraded, the genetic material corresponded to a living individual who had never previously been connected to the case. Detectives moved quickly, coordinating with local authorities in the town where this woman now resided. Every step was taken with caution and care. The aim was to confirm identity without causing undue alarm, to ensure that the woman's safety and well-being were paramount. When officers approached the address, they found Sheila Fox, alive, well, and living quietly in a modest home. 53 years had passed since she disappeared, yet there she was, very much alive. The moment was surreal. Decades of grief, speculation, and unanswered questions converged into a single, astonishing reality. Sheila, once the subject of missing persons posters and newspaper articles, was now a living, breathing woman, ready to be reunited with a family who had never stopped searching for her. The circumstances of her disappearance, when revealed, were as complex as they were compelling. Sheila had left Grantham in the early 1970s due to personal reasons that she had kept private for decades. Perhaps it was fear, perhaps circumstance, perhaps a desire to start anew. The exact motivations remained intensely personal. What was clear, however, was that she had lived her life quietly, away from public scrutiny, carrying with it a weight of a life interrupted but never entirely erased. When the news broke, the reaction was immediate and profound. The town of Grantham, the community that had never forgotten her, and the wider public across Britain were stunned and elated. Messages poured in from people who remembered her story, from journalists who had followed her case for decades, and from strangers who were moved by the enduring human drama. Social media buzzed with disbelief and relief. Hashtags emerged, and news outlets quickly picked up the extraordinary story. Sheila Fox, missing for over 50 years, was finally found. For the Fox family, the emotions were overwhelming. Margaret and John, now elderly, experienced a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. After decades of uncertainty, of longing, and of imagining every possible scenario, they could finally see their daughter again. Tears, hugs, and quiet words of gratitude marked the reunion, a moment that had been decades in the making. Friends, too, gathered where they could, sharing the profound sense of closure that had seemed impossible for so long. Law enforcement officials were quick to emphasize the importance of both patience and perseverance in cold case investigations. Sheila's case had highlighted the need for meticulous record-keeping, the application of modern technology to old cases, and emotional resilience required to see such investigations through to their conclusion. It was a testament not only to the enduring hope of a family, but to the evolving capabilities of law enforcement in the digital age. As Sheila began to adjust to life after decades of anonymity, the public's fascination with her story grew. Documentaries, interviews, and news articles chronicled the incredible journey of a missing woman who had survived half a century out of the public eye. Yet, despite the media attention, Sheila and her family maintained boundaries, choosing to focus on reconnecting with each other and rebuilding a life that had been interrupted so long ago. Her story also sparked broader conversations about missing persons in Britain and worldwide. Advocates and policymakers highlighted the need for better support systems for families of missing individuals, emphasizing both the emotional and practical challenges they face over extended periods. Sheila's case became a symbol of hope, demonstrating that even after decades, reunions are possible and that persistence by families, communities, and investigators can indeed yield extraordinary results. For those following the story, Sheila's return was not just about closure. It was about the enduring power of human connection, the resilience of those left behind, and the remarkable ways in which technology can intersect with patience to rewrite the outcomes of lives once thought lost. It reminded the world that, no matter how much time passes, the search for truth and resolution never truly ends. And for viewers watching this video, Sheila's story is a powerful lesson. Never give up hope and never underestimate the ability of persistence, technology, and compassion to bring answers, even when it seems like all is lost. If you've been inspired by Sheila's journey, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like hers remind us all why the search for justice, closure, and connection is worth every effort. As we prepare to move into Part 5, the focus will shift to Sheila's personal reflections, the emotional reunion with her family, and the first steps she took to reconnect with the world she had been separated from for over 5 decades. Stay with us, because Sheila Fox's story is far from over, and the chapters that follow are as moving and inspiring as the breakthrough itself. The first moments after Sheila Fox was reunited with her family were unlike anything anyone could have imagined. 53 years had passed, a lifetime of memories, milestones, and ordinary days lived apart. But the connection between mother, father, and daughter remained undeniable. The hugs were long and silent, the tears heavy yet cathartic, carrying decades of longing, fear, and unspoken questions. For Margaret and John Fox, the reunion was overwhelming. Every parent's worst nightmare had lingered for more than 5 decades. A missing child, a daughter whose fate had been uncertain, whose absence had left an unfillable void. And now here she was, the woman they had thought of every single day, whose face had haunted every anniversary, whose laughter had been imagined countless times, was finally back. Sheila herself was understandably cautious at first. Half a century away from her old life, she had built a private existence in a distant town, navigating a world that had evolved dramatically while she had remained hidden from it. The reunion was as much about acclimating to the passage of time as it was about reconnecting with the people who had never stopped hoping she would return. Family members had to carefully balance relief with sensitivity. They knew that Sheila's story of survival, though remarkable, was intensely personal. Why she had disappeared, what she had endured during her decade away, and how she had rebuilt her life were questions she would answer on her own terms. The public could witness the reunion, the joy and emotional resonance, but the intimate details of her journey remained hers to share or not share. Over the following weeks, Sheila began to reintroduce herself to the world she had left behind. Calls, visits, and conversations with extended family and old friends were tentative at first, but gradually, the warmth of connection began to fill the gaps created by decades of absence. Old memories resurfaced. Favorite childhood songs, family meals, the layout of her childhood home, alongside the realization that the world outside had changed profoundly since 1972. Technology, culture, even the town of Grantham itself had transformed in ways she could scarcely have imagined. Psychologists and counselors were involved to ensure that Sheila's reintegration was healthy and supportive. Decades of solitude, self-reliance, and independence could not simply be undone in a matter of days. The guidance offered by professionals helped her process both the trauma of her disappearance and the overwhelming flood of attention and emotion following her discovery. The media coverage was intense, but largely respectful. News outlets emphasized the astonishing nature of the case. A woman missing for over 50 years, discovered alive, and living quietly all that time without public recognition. Reporters captured the emotional resonance of her reunion with her parents, the relief of her friends, and the enduring hope that had carried the investigation for decades. Social media amplified the story, bringing it to a global audience. People across the UK and beyond marveled at the fact that a missing person case could be resolved so long after it had begun. Sheila's story also served as an educational moment. Law enforcement agencies used the case to illustrate the importance of cold case units, the application of modern forensic techniques, and the necessity of meticulous record-keeping over decades. Advocates for missing persons highlighted her case as a beacon of hope, emphasizing that even after half a century, reunions were possible and that families should never give up searching. Emotionally, Sheila's reintegration was complex. She experienced joy, relief, and the thrill of being reunited with loved ones, but also profound awareness of the years lost. Friends and acquaintances had aged, some passed away, and the world around her had moved on without her. The process of reconnecting required patience, understanding, and courage, not just from Sheila, but from her family and the wider community. As the days unfolded, Sheila began to share her perspective cautiously. She spoke about the quiet life she had built for herself, about the independence she had maintained, and about the small comforts that had sustained her through decades of separation. Her narrative was one of resilience, of survival, and of quiet strength. Though the reasons behind her initial disappearance remained deeply personal, it became clear that she had endured, learned, and adapted in ways that were nothing short of remarkable. Publicly, the story inspired conversations about the human capacity for endurance and the power of hope. People reflected on the idea that even in the darkest circumstances, life could take unexpected turns. Sheila's case reminded everyone that cold cases are not just about solving mysteries. They are about restoring lives, repairing relationships, and reclaiming time thought lost forever. The emotional reunion also underscored the value of family, community, and the relentless pursuit of answers. Every officer who had worked the case over the decades, every friend who kept her memory alive, and every family member who refused to give up played a role in creating the circumstances that allowed Sheila to be found. It was a testament to the profound impact that perseverance, compassion, and commitment can have in reshaping lives. For viewers, the lesson was clear. Hope can endure across decades, and the efforts to locate missing persons, though sometimes painstakingly slow, can yield extraordinary results. Sharing stories like Sheila's helps ensure that other missing individuals are not forgotten, that their families continue to receive support, and that public awareness remains high. As the story of Sheila Fox continued to unfold, it became more than a tale of disappearance and discovery. It evolved into a story about identity, resilience, and extraordinary lengths people go to maintain connections with those they love. The next chapter, Part 6, will explore the broader impact of her return, the lessons learned from her decades-long absence, and how her story influenced missing person investigations across the country. And if you're following along, remember to subscribe and click the notification bell. By staying engaged, you help amplify the importance of missing persons awareness, shining a light on cases that might otherwise remain in the shadows. Sheila's journey teaches us something vital. Even after half a century, even after years of uncertainty and fear, the human spirit and the unwavering commitment of those who love us can prevail. Part 6, Lessons and Ripples Across Time. The story of Sheila Fox's disappearance and eventual return was more than just a personal reunion. It became a lens through which society could examine the complexities of missing person cases, the evolution of law enforcement, and the enduring power of hope. When she was found alive in 2025, the impact resonated far beyond Grantham, touching families, investigators, policymakers, and ordinary citizens who had followed her story for decades. Law enforcement agencies viewed Sheila's case as a prime example of how persistence, evolving technology, and meticulous record-keeping could intersect to solve even the oldest cold cases. Officers involved in her rediscovery emphasized the importance of re-examining archives, maintaining detailed files, and never discounting minor leads. They highlighted that what might seem like an inconsequential detail in the early days of an investigation could, decades later, become a critical piece of evidence when combined with modern tools like DNA profiling, facial recognition, and digital databases. For detectives and cold case units across the UK, Sheila's case became a training example, a demonstration that time alone does not erase the possibility of resolution. It reinforced the value of patience, persistence, and innovative thinking. The case was frequently cited in seminars and conferences, inspiring a new generation of investigators to approach unsolved cases with renewed vigor, armed with lessons learned from decades of hard work and unwavering commitment. Beyond law enforcement, the story sparked renewed awareness among the general public about missing persons. Advocacy groups highlighted Sheila's journey as proof that families should never stop searching, no matter how much time has passed. Social media campaigns and public service announcements emphasize the importance of sharing information, reporting leads, and supporting organizations dedicated to helping families of the missing. Sheila's story became a symbol of hope, proof that even decades of absence do not necessarily mean the end of a story. The emotional impact of the case extended to those who work closely with missing persons. Counselors, psychologists, and social workers saw Sheila's return as a case study in resilience and survival. They noted the profound psychological effects that long-term disappearance has on both the individual and their family. Sheila's experience highlighted the importance of mental health support for both missing individuals and the loved ones who endure prolonged uncertainty. Sheila's story also sparked conversations about identity, privacy, and autonomy. Living under a different name for decades, whether by choice or necessity, she had maintained her own life quietly, separate from the expectations and pressures of the world that had lost track of her. Her return underscored the delicate balance between public interest and personal privacy, reminding society that every missing person has a life, an identity, and experiences that deserve respect, even as the search continues. For the people of Grantham, Sheila's rediscovery was transformative. The community had carried her story for more than 50 years, and her return was a collective moment of closure and celebration. Local schools, businesses, and media outlets reflected on the decades-long journey, remembering the uncertainty and the hope that had never fully faded. Her story reinforced the bonds of community, demonstrating the power of collective memory and shared care. At a national level, her case influenced policies regarding missing persons. Discussions arose around record preservation, technological upgrades in law enforcement, and interagency collaboration. The government highlighted Sheila's return as evidence that investment in long-term cold case strategies can yield meaningful results, even after half a century. The case became a benchmark, inspiring similar reviews of unsolved disappearances and reaffirming the importance of resources dedicated to finding missing persons. Public fascination with Sheila's story also sparked media retrospectives, documentaries, and interviews. Journalists approached the narrative with sensitivity, focusing on her resilience, the tireless efforts of her family, and the evolution of investigative methods over decades. Rather than sensationalizing the disappearance, the coverage highlighted human perseverance, the interplay between technology and traditional investigation, and the emotional gravity of finally reuniting a family. Sheila herself, though private, became an inadvertent advocate for hope and resilience. Her return reminded the world that even when circumstances seem impossible, life can take unexpected turns. She quietly inspired others, families still searching, individuals who have been missing for years, and communities that never gave up. Her presence was a living testament to the idea that closure is possible, and that the search for truth and reconciliation is never truly futile. The ripple effects of her discovery extended even further. Advocacy groups reported an increase in tips and leads on other long-term missing persons. Families drew inspiration from Sheila's case, feeling validated in their perseverance. Police departments across the country reprioritized some cold cases, encouraged by the knowledge that breakthroughs can occur decades later. Sheila's story became more than a reunion. It became a movement, a lesson in human resilience, institutional diligence, and societal care. Her return also prompted reflective conversations within families about the fragility and value of relationships. People considered the invisible threads connecting lives across time, the profound emotional weight carried by separation, and the transformative power of reconciliation. Her story became an emblem of patience and hope, resonating across generations and reminding everyone that even the longest waits can one day have an ending. For viewers, the takeaway was powerful. Cold cases are not just about investigation. They are about humanity. They involve empathy, patience, resilience, and a refusal to abandon those who have been lost. Sheila Fox's story showed that even when decades pass without answers, determination, compassion, and technology can converge to restore lives and bring hope to the darkest of situations. As Part 6 concludes, we reflect not only on Sheila's incredible personal journey, but also on the societal transformations her case inspired. The story of her disappearance and return is a testament to what can happen when communities, families, and institutions refuse to let someone fade into obscurity. And as we move into the final chapter of this story, we will explore the aftermath, Sheila's life now, the emotional closure for her family, and the enduring lessons that continue to shape the conversation about missing persons across the country and beyond. If you've been inspired by Sheila's journey, take a moment to share this video and subscribe. By keeping attention on cold cases, you help ensure that other families can find hope, that other missing persons may yet be reunited with their loved ones, and that stories like Sheila's continue to remind us of the power of perseverance and compassion. Sheila Fox's story did not end with her rediscovery in 2025. In many ways, it was only the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter defined not by absence, but by presence, resilience, and the delicate process of rebuilding a life that had been separated from the world for over 50 years. The first months following her return were both joyful and challenging. Sheila had to reconcile the life she had built in solitude with the family and community she had once known. Familiar places, faces, and routines were no longer entirely familiar. The world had moved forward, leaving subtle traces of change that she had to navigate. Yet, in the midst of adjustment, there was also a profound sense of relief, a deep gratitude for the people who had never stopped searching for her, and for the technology and investigative dedication that had made her rediscovery possible. Reconnecting with her parents, siblings, and old friends was emotional and transformative. Simple gestures, sharing a meal, walking through familiar streets, laughing at remembered jokes, were imbued with the significance of decades of separation. Every day became a reminder of both what had been lost and what had been regained. For the Fox family, the return of their daughter and sister was not just a personal triumph. It was a closure they had long feared would never come. Sheila herself spoke carefully to the public, emphasizing both her gratitude and the lessons she had learned. She shared insights about resilience, independence, and the human capacity to adapt in the face of uncertainty. While some details of her life during the decades away remained private, she openly reflected on the importance of hope, both for those missing and for the families who endure the uncertainty. Her story became a source of inspiration, demonstrating that even when life seems irreversibly interrupted, it is possible to reclaim one's place in the world. Her reintegration also had practical and societal dimensions. Law enforcement agencies studied her case as an exemplar of best practices for cold case resolution, highlighting the critical role of long-term record preservation, cross-regional collaboration, and the innovative use of forensic technology. For advocates and missing persons organizations, Sheila's story underscored the need for persistent support for families and the power of public awareness in sustaining searches over decades. Beyond institutional lessons, Sheila's story resonated on a profoundly human level. It reminded people of the invisible threads that connect us across time and space, the love of a family, the vigilance of community, and the quiet courage of those who survive in circumstances unknown to the wider world. It became a narrative about endurance, about the remarkable ways in which hope, patience, and determination can converge to restore life and connection. The media, while initially drawn to the extraordinary aspects of her disappearance and rediscovery, gradually focused on the human side of the story. Documentaries, interviews, and news features highlighted the emotional journey of both Sheila and her family. The coverage emphasized the lessons her story offered, that cold cases can be solved even after decades, that families should never give up hope, and that human resilience can overcome extraordinary obstacles. For the town of Grantham, Sheila's return was a collective celebration. Residents, many of whom had followed her story for generations, felt the closure they had long sought. Local schools incorporated her story into discussions about history, community, and resilience, teaching young people that even the longest searches can have meaningful conclusions. For the wider public, the story became a symbol of the enduring potential for resolution in even the most complex and long-standing mysteries. Sheila Fox's life today is a testament to the intersection of personal strength, family devotion, and the unwavering dedication of those who search for the missing. While her journey was marked by decades of absence, it also reflects the profound ways in which love, hope, and perseverance can persist regardless of time. Her story continues to inspire, reminding us all that even the most challenging circumstances can be rewritten, and that the human spirit has an extraordinary capacity for endurance. As we conclude this story, the legacy of Sheila Fox is clear. It is a legacy of hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that no one is truly lost when people refuse to stop searching. Her case continues to influence missing person investigations, public awareness, and the hearts of families who have endured the agony of uncertainty. For viewers, Sheila's journey is a powerful reminder. Never give up hope, support missing person awareness, and honor the relentless efforts of those who dedicate themselves to bringing the lost back home. Share this story, talk about it, and let it inspire perseverance, compassion, and the belief that sometimes, even after 50 years, life can be restored and justice and closure can prevail. Because the story of Sheila Fox shows us all that hope is not just a fleeting feeling. It is a force that endures across time, bridging the impossible gaps between despair and reunion, absence and presence, loss and restoration. And as we close this chapter, remember, every missing person has a story, every family has a hope, and every day brings a potential for extraordinary discoveries. Sheila's life today stands as living proof that even the longest waits can lead to moments of profound human triumph.